So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Victoria. I'm one of the estate planning attorneys with the Copenbarger law firm. One of the things at Copenbarger that we focus on is estate planning, making sure that people have a plan ahead of time, which means essentially have a plan before any emergent situation comes up. That could be incapacity or somebody passing away, and a variety of other issues. But with that, we also want to make sure that as again the year wraps up, you make sure that the financial side of things is taken care of. You're coming to the end of a tax year. There may be things that you need to think about, strategize for in these last couple of weeks. And if you don't already have a resource or somebody to turn to, we want to make sure that we have provided another option for you. So first and foremost, we're going to start with the estate planning side today and making sure that either you have a plan. If you don't have a plan, this will be a good insight as to why you do need some kind of planning in place. And for those of you who already have a plan, making sure that that plan is up to date. Then, as I mentioned, we'll transition over to lifestyle to make sure that have you checked in with other professionals as the year is coming to a close. So for those of you who don't know Copenbarger, I want to go through a few slides of introduction to who we are. So we are one of, if not the largest estate planning firms in the state. What that means is we're able to help people all across California. With that being said, we not only do estate planning, we also have other departments that are here to help make sure that you and your family are taken care of. The family side really comes into play in our estate administration department. That is there so that if something happens, whether it's incapacity or in the more likely circumstance, unfortunately, that somebody has passed away, you have or your family has a resource to go to for somebody to help guide them of what happens next, what do they need to be concerned about, what don't they need to be concerned about, and helps take that weight and burden off of their shoulders. We also have a business and tax department. So if at any point you have a business, you have rental properties, you have tax questions, we also have Sunny Boren who is able to help answer and assist in those areas. Now, one of the big things we are absolutely aiming to do and that you'll hear today is we want to keep everyone away from court. Court is not a fun place for people to be in, I would say 99.9% of circumstances. But we understand that sometimes court is inevitable. People fight after someone passes away. Kids don't get along any better now that they're adults than they did when they were children. And so unfortunately, litigation can become necessary. And so we also have Elaine Alston, who heads our estate litigation department. But we absolutely, as the attorneys, could not do what we do without our absolutely wonderful staff. And so we have one of the largest staffs for an estate planning law firm as well. And our staff is, again, the reason that we are able to help so many clients and that we are able to get back to people more efficiently, make sure that planning is done on a timely manner, and that questions get answered as they come up. We also have offices all over the state. So if you are in one of our physical locations or you have family that is and they need to come in person, we have them all over the place. But we also do a lot of appointments still on Zoom and over the phone. So if that's easier or more comfortable, just let us know. All right, so let's get into the meat and potatoes of the webinar. So first and foremost, when we're looking at estate planning, if you don't already have an estate plan, or if you started an estate plan but haven't had it looked at in quite a while, it's important to make sure you have numerous documents in place to protect you. There is not one document that is listed on this screen that will completely protect every part of your life or your family's lives. And so when we're talking estate planning, it is a comprehensive set of documents aimed at protecting you, your assets, and your family. So first and foremost, let's make sure on your checklist that this one is an absolute yes, that you have an advanced healthcare directive and that you have an advanced healthcare directive that was done after 2004. So there's a few pieces with that. If you do not have an advanced healthcare directive, you are leaving yourself extremely vulnerable. Back in 2004, privacy laws changed to say, unless you can verbally tell a doctor that your spouse, your kids, or anybody has the authority to make your medical decisions, no one is able to, unless it is then in writing. So if you can't verbally tell them, you have to have somebody have the authority in writing. No one, not again, even a spouse, has an automatic right to make those decisions. That is because, unfortunately, not all marriages are good. Not all marriages are ones where you would want your spouse to be your advocate. And in some cases, your spouse may not be the appropriate person because of their own limitations in one way or another. So it is important to ensure that you have this document in place before any emergency situation comes up. Again, though, you need it since 2004. So if you already had one in place, but it was done before then, it is actually no longer valid. And so you are walking around thinking you are protected, but unfortunately are not. We also recommend that this gets reviewed every 3 to 5 years. So even if you have one, even if it was done after 2004, people change, decisions change, life changes. And so we recommend that 3 to 5 years just to look it over and make sure, have the people you originally named changed in any way? Have they moved, passed away? Have you had any kind of a falling out? Have your kids that were minors now become adults? And have your decisions stayed the same? Do you still want to donate organs or not donate organs? Do you want life support still, or now you don't want life support? These are things that we want to make sure in place well ahead of time. Because in emergent situations, that is not the point that you want your loved one or your advocate to be scrambling around trying to prove that they are the right person to advocate for you. The other document that you want to ensure that you have is your durable power of attorney. So again, look at your checklist. I have a durable power of attorney. If you do not know the answer to this question, or the answer is no, now is the time to get one. This is again dealing with a situation where you are no longer capable of making your own decisions for finances. What that means is either temporarily you are incapacitated due to surgery or some kind of medical crisis, or you are permanently incapacitated. That can be stroke, end of life issues, Alzheimer's. There's a myriad of different reasons. And in some cases, you just flat don't want to anymore. We have plenty of clients who say, I'm at a point, I want my kids to do it. I don't want to have to think about my finances. So this is the document that gives somebody that authority. Now, even if you are married and your spouse would be the automatic person, you still need this in place. The reason is if you have any accounts like retirement accounts where you are the sole owner, they as your spouse don't then have an automatic legal right to manage those accounts for you, unless again, you've put that authority in writing. The other thing is for those of you who already have this document, did you have it done in the last 5 years? If your answer is no, again, you're walking around with a document that very likely will no longer protect you. The reason for that is that banks are cracking down on financial fraud and elder abuse. And so there are a lot of banks right now that are not accepting these documents if they're older than 5 years old. We have had a slew of calls over the last year from clients saying we tried to use this document, or in more circumstances, their kids are calling saying we tried to use this document and the bank is not accepting it. So what we have told our clients is it is a lot easier, it's a lot less pressure, it is frankly a lot cheaper to make sure that this document stays up to date on that 5-year schedule right now than to risk it and end up with us having to go to court to get that document verified, validated, and force the bank to accept it. So again, if you don't have one, let's get it done. If you do have one, make sure it has been done in the last 5 years. The other issue is if you do not have these documents, unfortunately on your checklist will be, I need a conservatorship. That is not something we want on your checklist. This is one of those points that we do not want people to fall under, because a conservatorship is court. This is where you didn't have a healthcare directive or a valid one. You didn't have a financial power of attorney or a valid one, and you have become incapacitated. And now you have advocates who are trying to advocate for you, but that have no legal authority to do so. And so what that means is we and they have to go to court to ask the court to appoint them, approve them, and then unfortunately the court gets to oversee their decisions and approve or disapprove of certain actions, both financially and even medically. This is not only exhausting and frankly stress-inducing, it is also very costly at that point because you need an attorney involved on a court basis. So if you have nothing else that you take away from today, make sure that you have those first 2 documents in place and that you ensure they are still valid. So come and see us if you have any questions on that. Now, next up, we start talking about trusts. So in California, most people end up needing a trust. And the reason is because if you own a piece of property and or have more than $184,000, at least as far as 2023 goes, you need to then have a trust to ensure that when you pass away, your estate does not, once again, go into court. So a trust is basically there to answer questions that a court otherwise would have. Who are you? Who's going to manage when you no longer can and ultimately make sure everything is wrapped up after you pass away? And then who is going to get to benefit from your assets? If you don't have these questions answered ahead of time in the form of a trust, unfortunately, the court says we now get to answer them. So once again, your family and the estate are dragged into court. As I mentioned before, similar to conservatorships, it's time consuming and it is expensive. Now, with a trust, there's additional benefits to that. Not only are we looking to avoid court and that extreme cost that comes with it, we are also able to do other forms of planning to protect your estate and to protect your beneficiaries. So what that means is if there's questions as far as taxes. Now, some people say, I'm not in the uber 1% of wealth. I don't really need to worry about advanced tax planning. The problem is, whether we like it or not, there are taxes everywhere, especially in California, and they apply to us, again, whether we want them to or not. So when we're talking about taxes, we can be talking about capital gains taxes, what happens after you sell a property, or even if you sell stocks. That can be what happens with property taxes, as far as what happens when my property transfers to a beneficiary, child or otherwise. Are the property taxes going to go up? This can be income taxes. This can be retirement law taxes. There are a lot of taxes that unfortunately implicate us. And so with a trust, you're able to do a lot of planning that can at a minimum reduce taxes, but in a lot of cases eliminate unnecessary taxes. Obviously, we're not advocating to avoid a legal tax, but you should not be paying any more in taxes than is absolutely legally required. Ultimately, though, your trust is there to ensure that your wishes are the ones carried out. Similarly to those first two documents, if you are in a position where you have not had your trust reviewed, let's say you set your trust up, but it was 20 years ago and you've never had it reviewed since, it is time to come in. Again, we recommend for all of the estate planning you have that it's reviewed every 3 to 5 years. Because what happens if 20 years ago you had minor children and now they're adults? You probably want to plan differently now that they are adults. For some of our clients, when they first came to see us, they had one child. And I actually just met with a family where they had listed 2 kids in there. They came back to see us and now they had 5. Well, we only had 2 mentioned. Thankfully, in a Copenbarger trust, we had set up additional protections that would have at least allowed those kids to benefit from the estate, but they would have had no other real control, insight, or anything else. And so it's important to ensure that as your life changes, your estate plan and your trust in particular changes as well. But the other thing is, especially if you have had a trust done without Copenbarger's involvement, on your checklist, you need to make sure that you have a pour-over will. The reason is that after you pass away, we're going to look at, or the court is going to look at, do you have your assets properly titled in the trust? Because when you set up a trust, there are certain assets that needed to go into it. Generally speaking, that is pieces of real property, that is checking accounts, savings accounts, and non-retirement investment accounts. Now, as a quick reason that Lifestyle is here today, we absolutely encourage you to work with people who understand trusts. And by people, I mean financial advisors. Not all financial advisors are created equally. And again, by that, I just mean there are advisors who do not understand trust. They do not necessarily understand which assets need to be in the trust and how to protect them accordingly. And so working with an advisor who gets that, who can help advocate for you and help ensure that things are done correctly, can have profound impacts, especially after you pass away. One of the reasons for that is even if you have a trust, but let's say you leave out an investment account, and that investment account has $200,000 in it. That is over that probate limit I mentioned, that is the $184,000. So what that ordinarily would mean is that that account is then subject to probate, even though you have a trust. So having an advisor who can help ensure that, do you have a trust? And if the answer is yes, okay, let's make sure we get it in the trust is important. It's also important to make sure you have an attorney who has created this pour-over will just in case that account never makes it in. The pour over will is there to ensure and act as a safety net, making sure that your assets go back to your trust. What it does is it tells the court that they don't have a right to put it through a full probate and decide what happens to it, but instead need to authorize and approve that it goes to your trust and is administered how you have already set up. So if you do have a trust, again, not prepared by Copenbarger, and you do not know or do not have a pour over will, come and talk to us. We can get that put into effect. All right. Again, make sure that your plan is up to date. So for those of you who have a plan already, whether it was done with us or not, when you set up a trust, you put in place what are called successor trustees. This is the person or people who are going to manage things when you no longer can. Well, are those the correct people still? Again, when you first came to see us, did you have minor children that are now grown adults that are mature and you want them to be in that role? Do you now have grown adults who were adults when you first came in? They've grown up a little more, and maybe they're not the best money managers in reality. So maybe they shouldn't be in those positions of control. Do you have family who's passed away? And so your trustee list is now down to one alternate, and it's a person that you're not sure will actually live beyond you. All of these things are there to ensure, and again, all of these questions we're asking are there to ensure that the people or person you have named are correct for you. So if you don't know, or you do know it's not the right person or people, come in and see us. Minor children. If the answer to that question is yes, are the guardians for your children still the ones that you want? This is one of the most intimate roles that we talk about, because this is an event or a series of events where you and your spouse have passed away and your kids are under 18 and need someone now to take legal guardianship. So this role is someone that we really focus on for parents with minor children. If you are a grandparent and you are concerned, do my kids have this in place? Absolutely encourage them again to tune into this webinar after it's been posted on our site, so that they can start learning about making sure that their kids, your grandchildren, are protected as well. If you don't know if the guardians are still the correct people, or you are questioning whether or not they're the right people, or you don't have them in place at all, again, now is the time to come in and do it. We never, ever want to see a situation where a parent has passed before their child is even 18 years old, but it does happen. And so the circumstance we 100% want to avoid is where, again, we have to go to court and ask for a court to appoint and approve a guardian for your children. That is a nightmare situation that is devastating for all involved, not to mention it's on top of the fact that your kids just lost their parents. So please, if this is your situation, we want to make sure that you have planned ahead of time, just in case the worst case scenario were to happen. Again, I mentioned this at the very beginning with your healthcare directive. Are the healthcare representatives still the ones that you want in place? Again, this is a very vulnerable position that you would be in, where you can no longer advocate for yourself. So you want to make sure the advocate that you have is correct, and that you just have an advocate in place, period. So if you don't know if it's still correct, or the person or people named are not correct, come in and see us. A big piece, though, and I briefly mentioned this, is, again, has your trust or has your plan and has your life changed? Changes in family dynamics cause some of the biggest then changes and required changes in trusts. One of the big ones that people often don't actually think about is when they're going through a divorce, they don't think about their estate plan. They might think about it in passing, but it's not something in the midst of a divorce that a lot of people take the time to come in and see an attorney for. Obviously, not everybody, but there are a lot of people who forget this step. Well, legally, if you have a trust still with your now ex-spouse, and there are any assets in that trust, and that trust says that that spouse or ex-spouse would get a portion of your estate if you were to die before them, that trust will still be honored and enforced, even if you've been divorced for 20, 30, or even 40 years. It does not matter, unfortunately. So if you are in a situation where that spouse or ex-spouse is not someone you would want to receive any of your money, you need to make sure that you have an updated plan. But the other side is true. In the happier circumstance, you're now married, you love your spouse, you're very happily married, I hope, you likely would want them included in your plan. But that's not always true. When we start looking at blended families, you're bringing assets in, they're bringing assets in, you each have your own sets of kids. Maybe you don't want it completely commingled, and you don't want it to be just as cut and dry as certain other plans may be. All of these pieces are things that, again, your trust can account and plan for. And it's important to do it before anything catastrophic happens, so that, as I keep mentioning, your wishes are the ones that ultimately are carried out. Another big piece is, are your beneficiaries still the ones that you desire? So that can be a few pieces, though, of conversation. One is, are they flat the right people? Maybe you didn't have kids when you first set up your plan and now you do. Maybe you have grandchildren. There's different components of the literal people or entities that you have named. So that can be charities, religious organizations, it can be schools. There's more to that piece. But it's also, are your beneficiaries inheriting correctly? There is additional planning that can be done for beneficiaries who may have advanced protection needs. That can be special needs planning. That can be planning where maybe the person doesn't manage money well and you need someone else to oversee it on their behalf. Maybe it's someone who is substance or alcohol dependent, and it's not then safe to give them a huge chunk of money that they would very likely use to harm themselves. There's different reasons when we're looking at beneficiaries that things get added or taken away. And so when you're looking at beneficiaries, it's not just, are the people or entities still correct? It's, are the protections around them still correct? Now, really quickly, for the question I just got in the chat, for existing estate planning documents, what needs to be done if you've moved to different states? Frankly, that is going to be a set up a phone call consultation if you're not now in California. The reason for that is, depending on the state you have moved to, can have either no effect and your estate plan is still completely fine, there's not going to be any issues, or in certain states, they may have drastically different rules where you would be wise to then talk to an attorney there. With that being said, though, if you've moved to a different state, and a Copenbarger trust is still valid, no matter what the state is. So if, God forbid, you're in a state where you didn't have it updated, and even if they have drastically different laws, it still is a plan that will be honored and upheld. So that is the good news there. As far as, though, again, are there further conversations that need to be had about the potential differences in laws? Yes. So come in and talk to us or give us a call. All right. Another question, if an investment account has beneficiaries already assigned, will a trust override those accounts? No. So this is another piece, and this is, again, where having a financial advisor can be invaluable. Beneficiaries take priority over a trust. So just because you came in and updated beneficiaries in your trust, we also then advise that you talk to your advisor to make sure the beneficiaries on those designated accounts are either not needing to be changed because it's correct, or now they do need to be updated. So that's a great question. All right. And then, are your assets properly titled in your trust? If the answer to that is no, or I don't know, talk to us, talk to your advisor, make sure that that answer is yes. Again, this is a question that a lot of people don't know about. And so it's important to make sure in that 3 to 5 year review, this is something that is addressed. Now, digital accounts are another piece that have come into play. And on this, I'm really going to focus for a moment on cryptocurrency. Currently, California still says cryptocurrency is considered a personal property item. So what that means is the rules for it are different than your other cash or investment accounts. Cryptocurrency is basically going to pass to whomever you want it to, as long as you either have put it in writing or that person has your key. So a lot of the cryptocurrencies have a specific key or code or chain, or there's varying names for it, but it's something that is its specific identifier. It's important to ensure that you have that in place and that that person knows either where that code is or knows it ahead of time. If you have more questions on cryptocurrency, absolutely let us know. All right, another question was, would you suggest to have the trust as a beneficiary for your brokerage account with stock? That is absolutely another, it depends. So it depends, is your trust up to date? If you have certain laws that are out of date, that can then cause catastrophic results if your trust is the beneficiary on certain accounts. The other question becomes, again, is it something that you want to do? Are all the beneficiaries in that trust somebody that you would want to have access to that account? So that's another one that come in and talk to us so that we can look at your specific situation. Now, another big piece is, especially now that you're coming into Christmas, have you made and recorded memories? One of the things after people pass away that is often talked about is, I wish I had a photo. I wish I had a video. I wish I had that voicemail. I wish I had a letter. I wish I had a memento. There's a lot of I wishes. And if you can help take those I wishes away, it can be the best gift that you can leave to somebody, especially when you're gathered around, if you're with family and you're going through and you're talking about memories and you're talking about just family traditions or history. Record it. It may not be a super high production value recording, but it's going to very likely be something that is cherished for years to come, especially for future generations who unfortunately didn't have a chance to meet you or to meet a loved one. Having those videos and actually getting to hear firsthand accounts of certain things, especially when it comes to history, traditions, and values, can be an invaluable, again, gift that you can leave. It's also something that at Copenbarger and with lifestyle that we're very focused on, and that is legacy. Part of your legacy is not just the financial piece, it's not just the technical, practical, it is the emotional side. And this is where, again, we at Copenbarger very much value working with other professionals that understand that. That as important as the money is and making sure it's protected and where does it go, there's another part to people and families. And that, again, is the emotional component. If you have any questions on this or don't know how to do it, how to get started, or should you even do it, that's something that you can absolutely come and talk to us about. Now, for those of you who have a Copenbarger trust, if you have not seen us in the last, I'll say 5 years, it is time to come in and see us now. So if since 2018 you have not been in to have your trust reviewed and updated, there have been significant legal changes that could very likely impact you. I am not going to go into too much of the specifics simply because this is very case by case specific, but there have been changes to Medi-Cal authority that have been profound, and there are further changes coming up. So if you have any questions on Medi-Cal and what those changes are, do come and talk to us. There have been significant changes since 2020 on retirement accounts and what beneficiaries have to do after you pass away with those accounts. And there have also been significant changes since 2021 on property tax increases after, again, you pass away and a beneficiary receives any form of property in California. If you have any questions on those, you haven't been to see us, we haven't talked about updates to your trust for legal reasons, now is absolutely the time to come in and make sure that those are at least talked about so you have peace of mind as far as, okay, they don't apply to me, or you end up with the peace of mind that they do apply and we've made sure that you're now protected. And now as I transition over to lifestyle, there's 2 questions I also need to ask. One has to do with them and one doesn't. One piece is you're coming to the end of a tax year. So have you talked to a CPA or your tax accountant? If you don't have one, if you haven't done this, I encourage you very much to do so, especially if you have a more complicated tax situation. For those of you where you're in the position, you have a checking account, a savings account, taxes are extremely simple, this may not be as big of a concern. But if you have property taxes that you're even worried about, you have income taxes, you have sales or capital gains taxes, you have a more complex situation, now is the time to go and talk to your CPA before the end of the year hits. But to transition over more to the lifestyle financial side of things, have you talked to a financial advisor? Do you even have a financial advisor? A lot of clients we talk to have a fairly sizable estate, but they do not have an advisor who can help. That doesn't necessarily mean they have to have one, but I always recommend talk to somebody. It is better to find out you're doing everything right than to find out, or your family to find out, things were not done correctly or could have been done even better. But again, working with an advisor who understands trusts, who understands legacy, who understands family and values is an invaluable component, and not every advisor has that. So I'm now going to turn it over to Lifestyle Financial so that they can talk a little bit about who they are, what they do, and how they can hopefully help you. All right, Chaz, take it away.
Good morning. I'm Charles with Lifestyle Financial. Before I get started, I want to just give a little bit of background on Lifestyle Financial. We've been in the financial planning business and the business of helping people accomplish their goals for almost 3 decades. I personally have been with Lifestyle Financial for the better part of a decade and a half. And so during that time, I've really enjoyed learning and growing and meeting just really wonderful people and helping people accomplish their goals and set goals and making the most of their financial situations. And so it's something I really enjoy and that I'm very passionate about. I've always enjoyed helping people and meeting with people, and so that's really something that I enjoy. It's never been work for me because I just really enjoy people I get to meet with and work with. Lifestyle Financial is we are a family helping families, and so there are a couple advisors here as well as an office manager, but we really specialize in creating investment plans, financial plans, and then offering good advice, being good, trusted financial counsel. And so we do deal with all types of financial instruments. And I can go through the whole list here, everything from stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, annuities. But really, what we specialize in plan creation, coming up with a plan. Because we can have the best performing financial products or instruments or investments, but really that doesn't necessarily accomplish your goal or your plan. So the first step is really creating a plan, implementing it, and then managing it. Because many times I've met with people who've gone through the trouble of creating a plan. And so they did a lot of the hard work, but then either it was never implemented or it wasn't monitored. And so after implementation, it was just set it and forget it. And that's really not the way the financial planning field works. Life is always in a constant state of change. I think one of the other things that really sets aside Lifestyle Financial is the fact that we are used to working together with attorneys. And so with the estate planning, and to be specific. And the reason that's a benefit is because we really ensure that not only is the financial side set up properly, but we ensure that things are titled properly. And so if you have a trust, we ensure that those accounts that should be in your trust are in your trust. And so we help you ensure that that's funded, because that is a very important thing that sometimes some financial advisors do tend to overlook. Now, as I said before, most individuals either fail to plan or they fail to actively work on implementing the plan. But it just happens. Life gets busy. Financial planning is not a super exciting thing. We don't think about, oh, wow, let's sit down at the kitchen table after a long day or take a day during the weekend or to go through this stuff. But it is important because without a plan and without being actively participating in your financial future, it can really affect the outcome. And so our responsibility is to you. Now, I'm sure the markets are not fixed and they're constantly changing. The only certainty we have about the markets that I can tell you is uncertainty. It's always going to be changing. But what we try to do is we try to take the most amount of uncertainty and as many variables out of it and try to demystify it as much as possible. So we really focus and specialize and dive into the minutia of the market so you don't have to. But if you would like to, and it's something you enjoy, we also enjoy talking and going through it. And if there's certain areas that you like to really get into, we have no problem talking about that either. The fact of the matter is too, most people don't have either the experience or the time to really just dedicate solely on their plan. You're busy raising a family, making a living, building memories. Financial planning is not always at the forefront of everyone's plan. That's not to say some people aren't capable or don't enjoy doing it themselves, because we have run into individuals that are more than happy and capable of doing it themselves. But some people like a little bit of help. And that's where, we come in and we can assist you with that and just become another trusted advisor. So the new investment cycle. So I'm sure we all remember the good old days of low interest rates. And as we really transition from the old investment cycle into the new one, what we're seeing is a departure from that low interest rate environment, as the Fed has this year been continuously hiking the rates. And so the market right now is digesting these interest rate hikes. We aren't anticipating any more hikes, and we think that we're probably going to see some type of an interest rate cut probably around or before summer of next year. Again, always subject to change because our crystal ball isn't working, but that is what we're seeing right now as a good possibility. The important thing, though, to focus on is that inflation is continuing to go down. And so we're continuing to observe a decline in inflation, which is really important. Now, the new investment landscape. So as the world gets more and more complex, there are more and more issues that are affecting the portfolio. And so really there's been a drastic shift in investment management and how that is going forward. And so the days of mutual funds and kind of set it and forget it and just kind of leaving things in the same investment mix, I think we've seen a departure from that. And going forward, I think there's really going to be a large benefit to being more actively managing the portfolio and making small adjustments to your investments going forward, because the world is just getting more and more complicated. And so being a little bit more hands-on and just ensuring that the small adjustments are made and fine-tuning is done, I think will really make a big difference. And also having your investments custom fit your financial plan. You can have good investments, but it doesn't mean they're necessarily suitable or that they fit into your financial plan. And many times we find that people's investments fall outside of their risk tolerance or their time frames or what they're really wanting to do. And then they wonder why they're falling short. And so that's where we go in, analyze, and then make those adjustments so that way we help them accomplish their goals or at least get closer. Markets don't ring a bell at the bottom. I always love that. And so people always ask me, well, when's the best time to get in the market? When's the best time to get out of the market? How does that work? The truth is, the markets are always changing, but you're rewarded for time in the market, not timing the market. And so having the perseverance to stay invested, which doesn't mean not making any changes, but staying invested in the market as opposed to pulling the money out when things get a little bit rocky. And that, again, goes back to having that financial plan, having that investment plan, and really being able to identify how much of a risk tolerance you're willing to accept. So that way you can persevere when things get a little bit rough, choppy, or uncertain. And so what we do is we do that legwork and try to remove the unknowns. And so recently people have been asking me, well, what keeps you up at night? What are you concerned about? And so there's a couple of things that we think about. And those are active conflicts. So what's going on with Russia, Ukraine? What's going on with Israel? And so these types of conflicts, we don't know how large they'll get. Things can often snowball and turn into wider conflicts, but these are things that concern us. Political uncertainty. We're going into a new election cycle, and the markets always get a little bit choppy when that occurs. Now, regardless of the outcome, the markets will digest the information and the sun will still come up the following day. But as advisors who are looking very much so into the future, we are always trying to stay ahead of the markets and being very proactive. And lastly, just to round it off with 3 points, U.S.-China relations, two of the biggest economies, biggest trade partners, and everyone really loses if that trade starts to stop or slow. And so just going forward, it's important just that we monitor those things. And so these are not necessarily things that give us anxiety, but these are things that we're very much so focused and paying attention to. Now, 3 areas that I think that we're going to see some good growth and frankly that we're excited about. Well, healthcare. We talk about the silver tsunami, but doctor's visits, appointments as we get older in life and continue our journey, very much so, is a growing industry. And so healthcare is experiencing a big boom. We're also seeing a huge growth in defense because all the military aid and shipments that we're sending overseas right now, we're having to replace that. And so that's really stimulating the economy as we rebuild and replenish the supplies that we've been sending out. And then to cap it off, technology, because technology has really been fueling a lot of our growth and into the future. The world is getting more and more complicated. And as more and more devices are talking to each other, they're going to require more technology, more semiconductors. And so these have been areas of massive growth. Now, before I go ahead and round it out, going towards the end of the year and some housekeeping things and just small reminders, RMDs. So if you haven't taken your required minimum distribution from an IRA and you're of age where you need to, it's important that you take it prior to December 31st, because if you don't, there's a 50% penalty on whatever you were supposed to take out. So the penalty is quite stiff. The other reminder I will tell people is that if you have 401ks and IRAs, you have to take a distribution directly from a 401k in order to satisfy the distribution from a 401k. You cannot take a 401k's distribution from a separate IRA account. However, if you have many different IRA accounts, you can take a distribution from one of those IRA accounts as long as it is large enough to satisfy your required minimum distribution from all of them. And then as you finish the year and meet with your CPA or trusted tax professional, if you're looking at adding money into a retirement account, remember, you can add money up until tax day. So you can still add and contribute to an IRA for the 2023 tax year up until April 15th of next year. And so anybody, if you'd like an opportunity to meet with us and think that we could be of assistance, we'd be more than happy to sit down and meet with you and see if we can help you. But I hope you enjoyed this seminar, and I'm going to hand it back over to Victoria.
All right, thank you. Oh, get everything back and going. Chaz, you did have a question, so if you have a moment, it's somebody asked or said, I thought the Secure Act reduced the penalty for not taking an RMD, or was that only for 1 year?
Let me double check on that real quick.
Yep, not a
There have been a
problem.
lot of changes regarding the
Yep.
RMD, so.
Well, and with the different penalties, with the age changes and everything else, there I know were differences in where you were at age-wise and what those penalties could be. And so that is definitely something that can be a case-by-case situation.
And that's correct. So the penalty has been reduced from 50% to 25%. And so I apologize. It was 50% for a long time, but it is now 25%. Perfect. But still a hefty penalty you don't want to pay.
Absolutely. All right, perfect. Well, thank you for that. So as we wrap up this webinar, it's important to, again, make sure that we're considering and you're considering what actually matters most to you. With that being said, it's why we emphasize pre-planning. It's why we emphasize do things again before the questions come up on behalf of your family. You don't want to leave things uncertain. You don't want them in positions where they're going, I don't understand. Why did mom or dad make this choice? Now, sometimes those questions happen because they don't agree with you, but we don't want it to be that questions were left unanswered that needed to be answered ahead of time. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, we are here, each of us, Copenbarger and Lifestyle, are offering free consultations for anyone who attends and watches this webinar. So please take advantage of that. If you have not worked with Copenbarger before, we have been around for over 44 years now. We have an extremely skilled team, as I mentioned at the beginning, of attorneys and staff waiting to make sure that you are taken care of. And the same thing goes for Lifestyle. We are waiting here to make sure that you have the highest level of service that we can provide and that you can receive. After this, you will receive an automated phone call asking if you're interested in setting up a Copenbarger appointment. If you are interested also in setting up a Lifestyle appointment, you can give us a call and we are happy to make sure that that gets over to them. We also at the end have a short survey available for you to let us know how we did. So if you are able to answer that, that would be great. I'm also going to ask either Chaz or one of our staff who's on the call, Trish, to put in Lifestyle's information in the chat. With that being said, thank you again for attending. We look forward to hearing from you, and thank you for any of you who do fill out that evaluation. We hope you have a safe and happy holiday season and end of the year. Let us know what we can do. We are here to help.